Well, welcome everybody to this show, which we have not named yet. We do not know what's going on, but we're going to figure it out real quickly and get into some interesting board game topics today. My name is Nick Murray of Bitewing Games.
I'm Joe. I'm one of the owners of Allplay Games.
Yeah, and we want to dive into that a little bit more since we're starting this podcast, this YouTube thing that we got going on, and we want people to know a little bit more about who we are and how did we get here to where we are recording on this esteemed podcast and why are we talking about what we're talking about, that kind of stuff. So Joe, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm Joe Wiggins. I basically have worked in board games most of my adult life. I've been in this industry for over 10 years now. For a big chunk of that, I worked at Panda Games Manufacturing for a very long time. Wonderful company. And then made the transition over here where the founder of, at the time, BoardGameTables.com was looking for someone to kind of help him run the company, take it to the next level. And so I joined up with him, and we've just for the last over 3 years now been just kind of making games, having a good time, and just rebranded to Allplay and just doing this thing. So yeah, that's kind of my history in this tabletop realm that we're in.
Yeah, and your title officially is the COO of Allplay, right?
Yep, COO of Allplay. That's right.
And a lot of your tasks involve not just working with, like, you have a decent amount of employees now, but running the game side of it, right? And all the game projects that you guys launch and publish, right?
Yeah, one of the major hats that I wear is I am the creative director of all the product, right? So basically all the games that we make, all of the different products that we make, like I am kind of the creative director of making sure that those all look, feel, have the things that we want them to have to be successful products in the market.
Absolutely. And something I've observed, and I think will be very applicable in this episode and future ones, is that you tend to have a very clear vision of what kind of game you want to make and how you want it to look, and then you work with the artists and the developers and the designer to execute on that vision. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually the part of my job I enjoy the most. I can't say that operational management is always the most exciting things. It's usually a bunch of spreadsheets and a bunch of meetings, which I don't mind, but it is fun whenever I lock myself in the office for several hours at a time so that I can research different varieties of lizards so I can have an artist draw the types of lizards I want them to draw. So, which is something I've done in the last couple of months is research lizards so that I can give an artist a list of the types of lizards I want in a game.
Nice. There you go. There's a good teaser, a lizard game coming from Allplay sometime or lizard related. But yeah, thank you for sharing the details. I don't have as interesting of a history in games, I feel, but yeah, I am one of two dentists that run and co-founded Bitewing Games. The other is Kyle Spackman, who is not with us because he works full-time dentistry and I work part-time. But it's interesting. I don't think I would have become a publisher if I hadn't have gone the path of the dentist first, because in dental school, we at Ohio State, we all wore gray scrubs. And we met in a building that was over 100 years old that had very few windows. And it was sometimes very depressing to sit and lecture for 8 hours with in that kind of setting and talk about teeth and nothing else. And that kind of drove me to more creative endeavors to kind of balance out things and keep me sane. And so I started dabbling in game design because I had grown up playing lots of video games and a few board games here and there, and started dabbling in board game design, and then took a stab at publishing and ended up working with Reiner Knizia, Kyle and I did, and then like you mentioned, I found that my favorite part of the creation process is not so much the grind of designing and playtesting and developing a game, but more so having a vision for a game and helping bring it to life and working with really talented people to do that. And so here we are. I've been really deep in board games for about 7 years, but Bitewing Games has only been around for about 3 years. But we're cranking out a lot of games, not quite as many as I'll play, but we're staying quite productive, I think, between the two of us, making a lot of games for folks. So there's a little bit of background on who we are, but and now we're here doing this random YouTube podcast, which we have not yet named. And I did come up with some ideas last night, Joe, and I know you take a lot of pitches from game designers when they're trying to pitch to you their game that they'd like to see you publish. Because you do an excellent job with the production and the artwork and stuff, and so I feel like anyone would want to work with you guys. But unfortunately, there's only so many games you can make, and there's way more designers pitching games than there are publishers making them. So you have to shoot down a lot of pitches at times, right?
Yeah, we publish about 20 a year, and I take about 200 pitches a year.
That's crazy. Yeah, and you travel all over to different conventions and stuff to take pitches as well. And I think you're one of the most open publishers that I've seen. Even when I was a designer trying to pitch to publishers, you make a lot of time for folks to pitch to you. For any designers who are watching, you catch them at a convention, you can try to schedule an appointment with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I try to make myself very available to the design community, that they know that Allplay is somebody that they can send pitches to, that we'll take a look at it, that we'll do our best. I like doing it at conventions because I can get the quick, like, hey, let's look at this game, let's talk about it, and get a good sense of whether or not we want to move forward. I like doing that at a convention. It's very hard sometimes to do in the office, to take hours out of your day to go on TTS and stuff like that. And generally it ends up being a lot longer than an in-person meeting would be, because you generally in that sense want to play through some of the game. So in general, but yeah, I take somewhere close to 200 pitches a year.
And you're very, very experienced, like I mentioned, in shooting things down as well. So Joe, I'm about to pitch to you some ideas for the name of this podcast that we are embarking on together. So
all right.
Brace yourself, and I just want you're not one to beat around the bush anyways, but here's some ideas for you. Buckle up. So first one, publish share.
That's gonna get a rejection right off the bat. That's pretty awful, actually. And I like that you're setting me up with like the bad ones, because you're leading to the good one. I know, like, you probably created a couple of like purposely bad ones, because there's one coming that's probably much better. But that's just awful. That was bad.
That's nonsense. These are all my children, and I'm very proud of them. Next one, Rub-a-Dub Pub.
It's better. It's still awful, but it's better.
Okay, we're baby steps. Boxes and briefs. I can't keep a straight face.
Oh boy, are all of these? Oh man, all of these are puns, aren't they? They're all puns.
It was late.
This is going to be awful.
It was late, Joe.
Yeah, I could.
Okay, yeah. All right. How about this? We combine Allplay and Bitewing into just All Bite.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
Okay, this next one's less punny. Please buy our games.
I don't think it really gets across the purpose of the podcast.
That's true. That's true.
In any way, shape, or form.
I mean, I
guess maybe like if it's more of an esoteric of like, please buy our games, because we're kind of recording this for a specific audience, right? Like, yeah. I guess people that might be just interested in learning more about like the insides of the industry, versus just talking about games specifically. But like kind of like for like people that are starting a publishing company or that have a smaller publishing company, maybe that's a decent name, Buy Our Games, right? Like because we're kind of talking about like all the things that go into like getting a game made from start to finish. I don't know, like maybe there's something there. I mean, it needs to be workshop, but like that has like an inkling.
Well, I admire you, Joe, for taking that more seriously than I did. And that's a good insight. I agree. All right. I also had Pub Venture Time with Nick and Joe. All right. Those are pretty bad. That honestly, this was really hard because I feel like there's already a million podcasts out there that's it's like Cardboard, whatever, or whatever. But Behind the Box, I think, is one that that you might have mentioned that I felt like, yeah, I could see that. It's like what goes on behind the box,
Okay.
you know, and the creation of the box.
I've got a pitch.
Okay.
All right. I've got a pitch, right?
Yes, I'm ready.
So since this is, and I mean, I guess we'll talk about like what the purpose of this podcast is next, but what about the back of the box?
The back of the box. Okay, tell me more.
The back of the box. Because when I think about it, the back of the box is like the informational part of it, the barcodes, the SKU numbers, the ad, like all the back of the box is not the glamorous thing in board gaming, right?
Yeah.
It's the thing that needs to be there to make the game sell, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're Splatter and you just don't have a back of your box, right? But like there's something to me that's always so enticing about the back of the box, right? For a board game, when you pick up the game and you flip it over and there's, you know, so much information there. There's sometimes a list of components. There's sometimes like a very small how to play. Sometimes there's but like there's also the barcode is there and the manufacturing information is there and like the publisher address is there. I think I think there might be something there, the back of the box.
Yeah, it tells a story, right? It's like who made it, where was it made, and what is this game about, and how did it come together? And yeah, I like that. Mm-hmm. I can jive with that. The back of the box, or just back of the box.
But let's talk real quickly about the purpose of the show.
Yes.
And I'll basically put this out there. For anybody that listens to this first episode, I'm going to welcome you to send us, right? This will be on YouTube, so you can comment on this video. And if you submit a name for the podcast that is really good and we really like it, and we decide that that's going to be the name that we take on, I will send you one game out of Allplay's catalog. And I'm sure Nick will match that and send you one game out of Bitewing's catalog. And you can pick whichever games you want out of both of our catalogs. We'll mail it to you free of cost if you are the one that selects the best name. All right. So there's already a contest. We've got investment.
But it has to be better than boxes and briefs. Otherwise, it's just not going to make the cut.
I will also send a free game to anyone that can submit a worse name than that, because I think that will be a harder thing to top. All right, so I actually want to talk about what the purpose of the show is.
Yeah,
right?
let's get to that.
I think I have like this interesting thing. So me and you started working together close to 3 years ago now, but maybe a little bit more like 2.5. It's been a while. Right, that me and you have really been knowing each other and working together.
Was it the start of 2022 or was it 2023?
I think it was sometime in 2022. It had to have been.
Yeah.
Right, or maybe the very beginning of 2023.
Okay.
Either way, it's been. I feel like it's been over 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
That we've known each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I've enjoyed most is, you know, a lot of this like relationship that me and you have started is because Bitewing was a very brand new publisher. And at that point, Allplay was actually a much smaller publisher, though somewhat bigger than Bitewing, right?
Yeah.
Had been around longer and done more stuff. But you kind of reached out to us and were like, hey, we're trying to grow our publishing company. Do you have any advice? Stuff like that. That's really where this whole thing started.
Yeah.
But since then, me and you have had like a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations, but sometimes we're like talking like business stuff, but a lot of times it just kind of devolves into us just talking about like publishing things and like, oh, what do you do about this? And what do you think about this? And like both of us together, right? Kind of like having just these more like, in my opinion, very interesting conversations about like just the joys of publishing, the work of publishing, and everything that kind of goes into it. And I've really just enjoyed those types of conversations and felt, man, like, what if we recorded some of those conversations, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Like actually formatted them. But like, what if we just kind of recorded that conversation? Because I feel like there's just a lot of people that might just find that information interesting to publishers just talking about the work of publishing board games. But then in addition to that, I thought that there might be a huge interesting thing of like us really kind of diving deep into some areas. Because I know that there's a couple of like, not so game focused, but more like industry focused podcast, but like really ones that dive deep into like, we're really going to like look into this category of this type of thing, and something that maybe if you're looking to start a publishing company, or if you're a very small board game publishing company, there's a lot of information that might be able to be like gained by listening to some of those conversations of people that have been doing it for a lot longer, or at least are in the midst of doing it themselves.
Yeah, one interesting thing that really put Allplay on our radar as a publisher is we would look at how you guys ran your Kickstarters, and how you laid out your pages and how you made your offers to folks. And we started, our first project was a 3-game project, the Criminal Capers collection. And so our first case study was going to your Kickstarter page where you had a multi-game project and looking at, okay, what did they do that made this project so successful, right? And I feel like that was very helpful and insightful to just observe what was going on, but then obviously forming a relationship with you and being able to ask you questions and talk about, what are you guys doing and what's your thought process behind your decision making, has really helped give us insights into how can we be a better publisher and what do fans want from projects or from games, and how do we better serve them. So yeah, I agree. I think that's a great summary of the purpose of this podcast, and hopefully whether you're a creator or an industry, somebody who's contributing to the industry, or just a fan and somebody who enjoys playing games and understanding better the cogs behind the system, I feel like there will be some interesting information and insights to dive into with each episode we do here. So, yeah, we look forward to figuring out what the heck to call this. I guess episode 1 will be without its official podcast name, but we'll figure it out probably by episode 2. So we'll keep you in the loop on that. But each episode we do want to dive into a very specific topic, and today's topic is focused around something that I think both of us are very passionate about, and hopefully it shows through in the games that we make, but it is that of art direction and artwork in board games. So we're going to be covering a lot of subtopics within this today, but one of them we had mentioned was as far as just the initial process of maybe even before finding and selecting an artist, how do you develop a vision for the artwork in a game? I'd like to hear your process, Joe. I feel like you're one of the best in the industry, and so
it's something I'm passionate about. And anybody that does complement the art direction or way that the game looks and feels is important, right? So really for me, and this is going to sound so weird, I feel like when I sign a game, I already have this final vision for the game. It's almost like I can see through this hazy tunnel of all the things that are going to need to happen, and almost in my mind's eye I can see the final visualization of that product, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes a lot of different steps, and sometimes it's not as clear, but I still remember when I first saw just the paper and wooden disc prototype that was River Valley Glassworks, and I saw the Pixar style animals that I wanted Andrew Bosley to draw, and I saw the mountain, I was it needs to have a landscape with a lake and a mountain and look very majestic and have this framed ornate frame. I literally, in the airport coming back from Unpub where I signed that game, I was calling Andrew Bosley and being dude, I have this game, I can only have you work on it. And so having that vision is just something that I've always felt. And sometimes it's hard for me to get motivated to start on a game until I really feel there's a solid vision and a cohesive vision for what that game is. Mm-hmm. And even more than that, right? I feel sometimes I just need to play the game until I get the sense of what this game is going to be. So something that Allplay does, right? And I'll give you a quick example of this. Something Allplay does a lot of times is sign games that are very small. Sometimes only 20 copies get made from Japanese designers, right? And so some people are these are essentially prototypes that I'm signing, right? Mm-hmm. They might feel a little bit different because they've gotten some art for them sometimes, but sometimes it's just a friend of theirs that has done the art, or it's mostly graphic design. And so when I get games like that, it's trying to play the game and go, what does this game feel like? What does this game actually feel like I'm trying to accomplish in this? And sometimes it feels very abstract. So trying to like lock in what exactly that game wants to be thematically. And then once the theme is locked in, I can start thinking a little bit more about what type of art style is going to be there.
Excellent. While you were talking about that, I tried to show here. I don't know if you can see this now, but River Valley Glassworks. So that gives some context to what you're talking about. I think that's an excellent way to approach any project, and I feel like there's been at least a couple of our projects where I've had a similar feeling. One notable one would be Zuvadis, where when I reached out to Quanchai Moria, I basically told them here's how I want the player screens in the game to look. Here's how I want the game board to look, and like here's the general vibe that I want to give, where it evokes the old Roman theme of Quo Vadis, but with a very stylish, serious animal vibe, and luckily we have a lot of creative folks in our industry, and they contribute a lot of great ideas of their own as well. And when the vision comes together and it pans out, it's a very satisfying process to see that artwork come in and see the game brought to life, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And it's really nice to also, one thing about Zuvadis that I like, I always like to see these different artists that are very prolific in the board game industry do their own take on anthropomorphic animals, right? So like Quanchai, you can look at like Zuvadis and like what he did there, but then you can also look at like Fit to Print and what Ian O'Toole's take on like anthropomorphic animals is, which is always just kind of a fun thing to see how different artists approach these like animals dressed as humans.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to approach it, and I think there is, although there are some anthropomorphic animal haters out there, I do feel like there's even Root. It's hard for folks to hate a game like Root. I haven't heard anybody hate on that, but maybe that was earlier in the anthropomorphic trend. But you make a good point. It's interesting to see these different takes.
I feel like people think it's very played out, but I think that there's like a reason publishers do this with animals is it's just, first of all, it's really hard to draw people well. Like people, like it's so much easier to draw animals well than it is to draw people well. And I think it's just like easier to like not have to set such a like hard line in which like the theme is set when you're doing animals as there is opposed to when you're doing humans, because humans can come across like different anachronistic like ways that things feel out of place with humans kind of removes itself when you're just dealing with animals, because you're already putting yourself into a more fantastical, even if it's set in very real world premises, because it is animals to deal with. It's just doing animals is just easier than doing people.
Yeah, for a variety of reasons, right? We've talked a little bit about gaining the vision for a game, but then how do you go about finding and selecting and hiring an artist?
So I feel like this is the conversation that me and you have the most, which is probably why we started with this subject, is we talk a lot about different artists, right? So one of the things that I do, right, is I have a Google Doc that I keep that just has, every time I see a board game and I'm just like, oh, that looks so good, I take that artist and I put them on this Google Doc with like a link to their BGG profile or their Instagram profile. And I'm just like, okay, one day when I have a game, I will pick, I have a list of artists that I am excited to work with. But I think the number one thing, and this is where I feel like a lot of publishers kind of miss the mark just a bit, right? And I'm not trying to necessarily discount what other publishers do. This is not a we're better than other publishers, right? But this is just like where I feel very like attached to it, is it's not just finding a good artist, right? Because it's easy to find a good artist. It's finding a good artist for the subject matter in which the art for the game is going to shine. And I feel like a lot of publishers are good at picking good artists, but they're not always great at picking artists that highlight what that artist is great at drawing.
Yeah, leaning into not only their strengths, but their passions, right? And when you can, that's something I think about a lot, is when you can find an artist who you know is going to be very passionate about this game, about the illustrations that they're doing for the game, it really shows, versus one that's just doing a job, which I haven't worked with any artist who necessarily was phoning it in, but something that makes it easy for them to really invest in what they're doing with their passion and their effort and all of that. So I think that's a really good insight. So I also keep a list of artists, and I make little notes of like, okay, here's something that they do a lot of, or here's something they're really good at, or here's a type of art style that they do a lot of, and keep that in mind for maybe when we want that down the road. So how about working with different artists? What's been your experience? I've found that artists operate very differently from each other, their process and how involved they keep the publisher. But what's been your experience with that?
There's a lot of places that you can go with this, right? But one of the things that I think is most important is there are artists that understand board games, and there are artists that have no idea. They're just artists, right?
Definitely.
And so I think a lot of times the difference is how that artist is going to draw things in composition, right? And so if an artist understands board games and understands is somebody who is familiar with like the modern board game hobby, they're going to be much better understanding like the ratio of cards and keeping room for text at the bottom and like, oh, what is this? But like if the artist doesn't know board games, right? A lot of times what you're going to get is you're just going to get pictures. You're going to get really pretty pictures. Yeah. And that's fine. That's fine. I've worked with different artists, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, because sometimes you want the right artist for the subject matter. When I made pies, I said, I want the best botanical illustrator I can find. So I wanted an artist that can draw fruit. I wanted the most beautiful cross-section fruit I could get. And so that's where I came across Wendy Hollander, right? But Wendy Hollander is not a board game artist, right? So she literally just delivered me prints of fruit. And then I had to have everything else for the cards, the layout done, whereas other artists would have been able to composition that where it belongs on the card, right? And I'm not trying to say like Wendy did not do a great job. She did a phenomenal job, but there's just definitely a distinct difference in working with artists that know board games and don't. So that would be like kind of the first point I would make as far as like when working with different artists, understanding what their skill sets are and what their working history has been.
Yeah, we've had some growing pains with this as well, where, just giving an artist a project to me, like, can you illustrate a box for us, illustrate these cards or this game board for us? And then when it comes back, it's like, oh, I don't know how we can integrate this into an actual physical board game component. And realizing with those types of artists, it helps a lot to have a graphic designer who's on the ball and maybe provides them with a template to begin with, and being like, just fill out this template. Here's placeholder for the logo or for the text on the card or the symbols or whatever. So work around all of this. And when those types of artists who don't work so much in board games, when they can see more of the template, the graphic design template that their art is getting integrated into, it's much smoother, the finished product. So
yeah, and I think that this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that some artists are able to do a very good job about graphic design. But some artists are not graphic designers, and they should not be doing the graphic design work of a game. In fact, I find it kind of like 30-70 whether or not the artist even wants to illustrate the logo for the game, right? A lot of times the artists have like an artist that's able to draw like really beautiful landscapes is probably not the person that's going to be able to do the word mark illustration for the title of your game, the typography, right? And that's usually going to be something that the artist isn't going to handle. Sometimes the artist does. Sometimes the artist does, and you're like, I wish you wouldn't. So sometimes you have to be like, hey, thanks for that, but like we're going to use the graphic designer to do the typeface.
Yeah.
So I will usually give artists the option whether or not they want to do the typeface or whether or not they don't want to do it. And I tell them it doesn't matter to me. Like I have graphic designers that can do the typeface if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But some artists are like, no, I have a vision for what this typeface is going to be.
Nice.
So like there's just different aspects of understanding that. One of the things that you brought up, which is something that Allplay doesn't do a lot of, so whenever I have to do it, it's kind of like a headache for me, is game boards. So we don't do a lot of game boards here at Allplay. We very purposely have games, not that we avoid it specifically, but like we don't do a lot of games where there's like a big game board, but we have done some. And sometimes like I call it wireframing. Right? You almost try to like have the graphic designer mark out like, okay, here's the parts of the game board that you cannot draw on because we're going to have this filled with icons and tiles are going to be covering this spot and all of this other stuff. But here's the areas that you do want to draw on. And so you kind of hand them what I call a wireframe that has like all of the marks for the graphic designer with different colors of like, don't draw in these boxes, don't draw on this area, don't draw on this area, but all of this area we want you to draw on, and we want you to draw like this because this is what the game board is going to look like or be represented by.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful for artists to, know what the heck they're doing and where their art's going to actually shine through. I imagine it can be a disappointment when you have them, if you had an artist do this very nice illustration and then you end up covering it all up with graphic design, the UI and everything. So it's nice to give them direction to begin with. So on the topic of working with different artists, do you have any anecdotal or interesting stories about art projects that you've done or working with artists and in your experience?
I have so many. I'm going to have to pick and choose a couple here. But I've got several incidents, so we can go back and forth on a couple of these. So one of my favorite stories, though, is the game Couture that we did, which is an auction bidding game. When we signed this game from Japan, we were playing it, and the original game had very not great art. It was called Golden Animal. It really was like animals and rocks, and it was not super evocative of anything. So this is one of the games where we played it over and over and over again because we liked the gameplay, but we were like, what does this feel like? Because we're not just going to do animals, right? We're not just going to do animals and rocks, right? And so we were trying to figure out like what this game would end up being. And what we finally felt like it kind of felt like a job where you're like splitting your resources up amongst 3 different sections. And so in order to split your resources up, like what did that feel like? And it was like, well, what if it was different places that you had to be in? What types of professions have different people where you need to kind of divide up your time? And we were like, oh, you know what? We should do it like about modeling, right? Where you're trying to like be on the stages in these different areas in New York and Paris and Tokyo, the fashion capital of the world. And you're a model, and so you have different resources that you can allocate to these different areas in order to build your modeling career. And we kind of thought that was like an interesting theme to start going forward with. But one of the things, and if you can find some of the actual cards of the game, one of the things that I was very passionate about before we started this project was I did not want to hire an artist to draw me fashion art. I wanted to hire a fashion artist, which I think is a big difference, right? I think finding an artist that understands what fashion art really is that already draws that. And so I found this artist, and I believe she was from Hungary, and she was an actual fashion sketch artist. She has drawn for like Louis Vuitton and Gucci, and she draws in this very like, in my mind, when I think fashion art, I think of this very sketch style of art, right? Where like the models themselves aren't very clear, and it's more about like the clothing, right? And it's very sketched and very like not rushed, I would call it, but it has like a specific aesthetic. And so when I finally found this artist, Hannah Mirgo, and I reached out to her, she had no idea what I was talking about. She had never worked on a board game. She didn't know anything about modern board gaming. And when I said, I want you to draw these cards, it's going to be for a game, she honestly thought I was a crazy person, but I kind of showed her a bunch of the games that we had done and like explained it to her, and she was like, "Okay, I'm very interested in doing this." But at the end, I feel like this is one of the most beautiful projects that we've ever done as far as like thematically integrating the art into the game. But one of the things is I sent her copies of the game when she was done, and she was so excited because she's just a working artist, right?
Yeah.
She's just a working artist, and but she had never seen like her name on a product like that, right? Like art by Hannah Mirgo, and she was just so thrilled about it. It was just really exciting to see her get that energized of like, hey, this is something I created. So that was one of the ones that I had the most fun working on, is because I got to work with an artist that worked in a very specific style and have her bring a game to life in the vision that I saw for it, which was not just hiring any old artist and going, I'd like you to draw some fashion like, clothing, models and clothes. I was like, no, I want fashion sketch art for this game. And it really came together in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, that turned out so nice. Yeah, I appreciate the efforts and the lengths you go to find the right artist for the task, because it brings a lot more variety to the industry, right? We're guilty of working with some of our favorite artists who we'll continue to work with. Folks like Kwanchai Moria who are very have a wide range of talents and capabilities. But it's always cool to see publishers bring in these artists who have never worked in the industry and really help them shine with these kinds of productions. So kudos to that. I probably don't have as interesting of anecdotal stories, but probably the most unique one for us was Shuffle and Swing, actually, which was illustrated by Gary Chalk, who did a lot of the Redwall series of books. And when we had this game that we formed, Robert formed this theme for, about these mice and cats building instruments for giant musicians, it very much reminded me of that Redwall aesthetic, that series of books by, I forget his name now, but that's a fantasy series that I grew up reading, and I feel like the art style and illustrations have always stuck with me. So I reached out to the artist of Redwall, Gary Chalk, and asked him to help bring this game particularly to life. But what's interesting is Gary's been around the block for decades now, and he has his way of doing artwork, and it's very different from any other artist that I've worked with. It's old school, I would say. He is based out of France, and that's where he currently lives. And what he does is he draws the entire illustration on just a huge sheet of paper. And that's what he did for the box cover here, where he even told us, he's like, I have an idea for the illustration here, but I need a bigger piece of paper, and it's not here in my town, so I have to go out and, when this paper store is open, and get this huge piece of paper. And he ended up, illustrating this cover here and scanning it and sending it to us that way. And that proved to be an interesting challenge for us, because the game board has a lot of complex stuff going on, and we initially were planning to have him illustrate things. But when you have all of these paths and spaces and things like that on the instrument boards, how do you get somebody who illustrates on paper to work around those limitations, right? And so we found that we had to also recruit the illustrator of Cat Blues, Alicia Giroux, who's also fantastic. And she works in the digital form more so, and she has a background in graphic design. And so we brought her in because I've seen her do Redwall-inspired illustrations, and so I felt like her illustrations could complement Gary's well. And so they had to work together, not specifically with each other online or in person, but really complement each other's work, I would say, to help bring this game to life. So Alicia was doing, the instruments, and then they both contributed to the game board, where Gary did kind of these more vivid illustrations in between the functional parts, where Alicia did the rondelles and things like that. And so that was by far the most challenging, artistically speaking, the most challenging production we've ever done. Mostly because, the way that Gary works is very different from any other artist that I've worked with before. And so we had to figure out how do we integrate his his methods into a board game. So, do you have any more stories on your end, Joe?
Yeah, I got one more story, and then I've got kind of an anecdotal thing, and I have a couple more things that I think maybe we would be best to talk about before we got to the ending of the podcast here. But one of the things is I wanted to talk a little bit about like the process that happened with Things in Rings, and so this is one of the games I am most proud of. I fully believe that Things in Rings is the best product Allplay has ever put together in terms of a cohesive project. The gameplay, the art, the mechanics, the components, everything about Things in Rings. I do not think if I was to go back and do anything differently. I am so happy with the way that this product turned out. But this is one of the few times where I started a game without that clear vision of what the game was going to be, because I just fell in love with the gameplay. The first time Peter Hayward showed me this game, he actually wasn't even pitching it to me. He was pitching me a different game, which I said no to, and a different publisher had picked that up. And he was like, well, I have this other thing because our pitch ended pretty early. Do you want to just see what this thing is? And he showed it to me, and I immediately was like, I want this. Give it to me. And he's like, really? I was like, give it to me right now. I want this. I was so enthralled with Things in Rings. And when I signed it, it was called Vendo, and it basically just had cards from another game Peter had designed called French Toast, and it was done with like 3 strings of yarn, and the mechanics had changed very slightly from what he originally showed me, but the game was functionally a Venn diagram with trying to figure out what words belong in different groups according to different rules. When I first signed this game, it was called Vendo, and we were like, okay, we need to find a better name. And I don't know if this ever happens to you, Nick, where you have placeholder names for games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, we're like, this isn't final, but this is what the placeholder is. And so I was trying to figure out what the name of the game was going to be. And we went through so many different orientations of like what the game could possibly be named. And finally, the best thing that we had to settle on, and I called it the placeholder, was Things in Rings. And I was like, I'm not happy with it. I don't love it. I'm very much just like on it. Yeah. And I was like, well, this is what we'll call it for now, and we'll come back to this and figure out the better name for the game. But I didn't know what this art was going to be. And so the artist that I actually hired is a graphic designer that we work with a lot. Her name is Snow Conrad. And she had been wanting to do some illustration work for us. And I was like, you know what? I have this game. I don't really know what the theme or style of this game is going to be. So I'm 100% happy to let you, work with me on just trying to develop the style. And not to say that I was trying to copy that game, but I had seen the artwork that had come out previously from Everything Ever by Floodgate Games. And I was like, very simple, thick line drawing illustrations, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, we'll just kind of use similar to that. And so we started down this path where I was like, okay, this is kind of the evocativeness, the simplicity that we're going for. And so she did and I had 5 illustrations for her to do. I was like, start with these 5. And she drew them, and I was like, these look like flashcards. I do not like them at all. And so let's try something different. And I was like, what if it was more of this very tattoo style art, right? And so she drew that, and I was like, no, this is wrong. And I was like, let's try something else. And she did a couple of different other versions. I was like, no, this isn't right. No, this isn't right. This doesn't make me feel good about it. And finally, she did this one illustration style that I actually really liked, where it was like doodles. She did doodles, right, of the different things.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is the best we have. And they were just black and white doodles at that time. And I was showing them to a couple of different people. I'm like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And one of my friends looked at the doodles and he said, this one reminds me of Dr. Seuss. And I went, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Literally, I could not stop. I was like, that's it. That's it. And I went back to her. I was like, hey, the doodles are great, but but Dr. Seuss. Like Dr. Seuss is what we're doing. We're doing Dr. Seuss illustrations.
Yeah.
And she drew the first couple. She drew like 3 illustrations, and I was like, okay, this one's good. These 2 are too silly. So like one of the ones she drew was like cheese, but she had like a mouse driving a car made of cheese. And I was like, I get that this is like very whimsical, but this isn't set in reality. So like for the game of Things and Rings, it literally has to be a piece of cheese. Like it has to be a block of cheese, right?
Yeah.
We can't have a mouse driving it like it's a mechanical car, right?
Yeah.
Like people have to look at this illustration and not think, what is this about? This is cheese, right?
Yeah.
And so we that's where we really started in with the thing. And then as soon as I decided on the Dr. Seuss theme, I go, the game's already called Things in Rings. It's all, and then I fell in love with the name, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like the name was placeholder, but became final because of the like theming that we decided to use. And honestly, I just am so happy with the way this one came out. But like going into this one, I hired an artist very specifically because I was like, I do not know what shape this game will take. I did not go in going, I need you to draw Dr. Seuss pictures. I said, this is going to be a style, and I don't know what that style is. We're going to explore that together. So I had to make sure the artist was on board.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. I remember when you first showed the cover to me, and I was pumped about the game because I think a lot of us grew up watching reading Dr. Seuss, right? And this just hits all the nostalgia buttons while also really leaning in very well to the actual experience of playing the game, where there's all these kinds of different objects that are being thrown into these rings, and people are trying to figure out where they fit. And this to me is just an exciting game to break out and see what cards end up in your hand, and then figure out where they're supposed to go. So excellent insight there and story. And Snow just crushed it. I can't believe how good all of these illustrations are and how much they evoke that Dr. Seuss vibe.
So many illustrations.
How many total? Do you know the count?
Oh, it's like it's almost 300.
Oh my
with the promo pack, it is 300. Yeah,
that's wild. So yeah, that's so cool.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share specifically when it comes to just anecdotal?
One interesting insight for our upcoming game, Icor, is the artist there was somewhat like when you found the artist for Couture, right? Somebody who is steep in the fashion industry, and that's kind of where they live, and you want to bring what they're doing in their industry, you want to bring that to the board games and let gamers experience that as well. Well, for us, one artist that I found who's never worked on a board game up until Icor is Tyler Miles Lockett, and it was really interesting to me to find him on places like Instagram and Twitter at the time, and see that he was making his own Greek mythology book, which is actually supposed to launch on Kickstarter soon. But I think it'd be more illustrative to show his website here, because when I found him, I felt like, oh man, if we're doing Greek mythology games, we have to get Tyler in on one of these games, because he has been studying and researching and illustrating Greek mythology for years now. And as you can see, like, his stuff is just so vibrant and lush and evocative of all of these Greek mythology stories. And so we had to get him in on Icor for doing that. And it was cool to reach out to him and to see how excited he was to do something different from his own upcoming illustrated book, which he's also very excited and passionate about. But to see him really invest in bringing Icor to life, to the point where he was even giving us ideas for how to do the production and the components, things like the tokens, which he shared with me images of old Greek coins and the way that those looked. And that was the inspiration for the deluxe, tokens that we use in Icor for the game itself. So things like that. And then I'm still finding little Easter eggs that he put into Icor. One good example is one thing that confused me when he illustrated the cards for this game, or the characters more so, is that all of the gods have this glowing, ethereal vibe to them, which makes sense. They're Greek gods, right? But one that stood out to me was Hercules was like way more saturated than the rest, and I'm like, why did he illustrate this one so different from the rest? I wonder if I can find an image of Hercules, maybe within this. But what I realized was like, oh wait, Hercules is actually half human, right? He's a demigod, and so he's less glowy than the rest. And I apologize, I can't find a picture of him right now. But stuff like that he snuck into the production is like so cool. And I think for those who are in the know, they'll find more Easter eggs like that, where somebody who's both knowledgeable about how to illustrate, Greek mythology, but also about the mythology itself and integrating that into the artwork is super cool. There's another cool insight. We lucked out finding Tyler and working with him on Iker because he absolutely crushed it. So there's my other anecdote for you. But did you have one more, Joe?
Yeah, this is more because we're kind of doing this for people that, might also publish games or be looking to publish games or just, working in the industry. I have one funny kind of anecdotal thing that I just think is like a funny thing to have done. I signed a game that was going to be set in the golden age of Vegas. It was called Vegas Strip. And I said, the only artist that I want to work with on this is Vincent Dutrait. Like we talked about at the beginning, marrying the perfect artist to the perfect subject matter. That golden era of Vegas, that really just like glitz and glamour 1920s, 1930s style. I was like, that is Vincent Dutrait's wheelhouse,
Right.
And so I, though, have worked with or know a lot of publishers that have worked with Vincent, and have all told me, and again, this is not to dog on Vincent because I loved working with him, very slow, and not just slow, very late. He's probably one of the most worked with artists in the industry. It's understandable, but everyone told me he's very late. It takes him a long time. So I wanted to work with him. So a year or no, basically it was like March timeframe that I had decided on the theme, and I knew I wanted to work with Vincent. But I also knew that this game was going to Kickstarter in October of 2024, and this is March of 2023. So I reach out to Vincent and I say, hey, I have this game. This is the theme. I've really wanted to work with you. Can we work together? And Vincent's like, yes, absolutely. I'd love to do it. He's like, when do you need the game by? And I said, I need it by December 2023. And this is in March. And the game isn't going to Kickstarter until October 2024. And he's like, great, no problem. Absolutely. I can make that work.
Yeah.
November timeframe rolls around. I reach out and I'm like, hey, Vincent, like just wanted to check in. He's like, oh, so sorry. Haven't been able to get to it. He's like, I'm probably not going to be able to hit the deadline. Is it okay if we move it? Will that impact you? I was like, it's okay. We can move it. He's like, okay, February. I'll have the game February.
Yeah.
February 1st kind of rolls around. I'm like, hey, Vincent, anything happening? He's like, March. I swear. March, it's done. Contact him in March. I'm like, hey, anything ready for the game yet? He said, Joe, when do you need this game by? I'm so behind the ball on so many projects. He's like, I have not been able to make time for this. Just tell me when you need the game by, and I will get it done. And I said, how does July 20th sound? And he goes, that would help me so much. He's like, July 20th, I will make sure it's done. And he did deliver by July 20th. Nice. But again, remember, we had kind of a December 1st deadline. Yeah. But I put that deadline there because I wanted the artwork by, let's just call it August of 2024. Yeah. Like if I had gotten it in September, it would have been fine. But I was like, I need it at least by August, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, it kept getting pushed, but I kind of gave myself like 8 months of buffer in working with an artist that was very well known. Again, delivered some of the greatest art I've ever gotten for a board game. Really happy working with him, happy for everything. But I kind of built this buffer in there because I knew that he was late. So, or at least other publishers had told me, hey, I've worked with him, he's great. But it took me a long time to get my stuff. So going into the game, I kind of built in my expectations for when I was actually going to need that art, which I just think is anecdotally very funny and something that some publishers should think about because, let's say you get a couple pieces of art, but then you need the rest of it to publish the game, but you have enough to launch the Kickstarter. If it's going to take you 7 months to finish getting the art, that's 7 months of just getting art before you can actually get anything else done to put the game into publication. So that was one of those things where I was like, kind of thought it was an interesting anecdote for other people that might be looking to publish board games is, hey, sometimes you might want to work with a really popular artist. You should try to build in some buffer time and not say, oh, I need the game in 2 months. You should say, okay, this isn't going to be published for, maybe a year and a half, 18 months down the road, but say I need the game art a year a year from now, as opposed to when you actually need it to launch the Kickstarter, which is just something.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think dentistry, I was going to say artwork is not quite like dentistry where it's like, yeah, it'll take me about 20, 30 minutes to do this filling. And I'm usually, right on the money with my estimate there, because there's things like revisions, right? Or maybe a piece of art turns out being more complicated or difficult than the artist anticipated. And somebody like Vincent Dutrait, who seems to be, it seems like a new game illustrated by him is announced every month. Like he's obviously swamped with a lot of projects. And so I do agree. It helps to have a long lead time when you're working on with very busy artists. So go ahead.
So I was going to bring up different than anecdotes, but something that me and you as a company have both done is work with the same artists over and over again when it comes to establishing a line of games. So very purposely, we use the same artist for what we call our 1 minute to teach line, which is Chomp, Mountain Goats, Dandelions, Sequoia, Lore, most recently. And so we always have the same artist, the same typography, the same graphic design, so that those games, like when they're next to each other, are really easy to establish that they're a part of a series of games. And then also we have now what's called the Tiny Box series, which has the same artist for all of them. Even though we're letting her do very different styles of her art on all of them, we are exclusively working with Sai Beppu on all of the art for the Tiny Box series for Allplay. And so when you are doing a lot of games or trying to establish branding in a line, working with the same artist over and over again, even though I really enjoy working with lots of different artists, sometimes to establish consistency in a certain product line, you do want to have the same artists over and over and over again.
Yeah, and hopefully they have a wide range, right? You want somebody who, doesn't make all the games look alike. So, which I think you guys have already done a really good job with. I'm showing off Fairy here, and then Panda Panda is a very different looking game, right? Mm-hmm. But it's cool that there's that tie-in of, a distinct artist iterating on themselves and within a line of games. So yeah, we do have more of that nature coming out next year. I think, and it's nice to work with an artist who is familiar with how you work as a publisher and just get ahead of any kind of kinks in the road that you'll encounter with a brand new artist to the industry. So awesome. Well, yeah, I think that covers a wide span of artwork and board games. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we close things out here, or get to, I guess, our final topic of art?
No, I think that's pretty much where I think we've established a lot of context. I mean, I honestly could talk about this for like 3 more hours. But I think at a certain point, people listening would get very bored about the minutia of working with artists. But it's honestly one of the things that I think, board games are 50% art. They're 50% design, 50% art. And I think that when it comes to choosing an artist for a game, a publisher cannot spend too much time thinking about it, right? Like, I think that there's a really good depth of discovery when it comes to establishing art. And maybe at some point in this podcast, depending on how long we decide to do this for, maybe we can reapproach the subject with new things that we've learned or different anecdotal stories and kind of do a art for board games part 2 or something like that. But we can kind of move on into what we would say is the final part of the podcast.
Yeah, and I think I agree with what stood out to me from what you just said there is board games are 50% art, right? And I'm really glad to see that publishers are giving it the effort and the investment that it deserves. And I think part of that is just due to the crowdfunding race to be the next standout game, right? The board games are a much more competitive market than they used to be. There's many more publishers and folks in the industry, and so artwork has become a huge selling point to help you stand out, right? And there's been a lot of amazing games made over the past few decades that not only play amazing but look amazing, right? And I feel like board games have really come in to their own in terms of doing a stellar looking game, not just a stellar playing one. So yeah, we wanted to share our top 5 favorite artworks or productions, artistic productions in board games that are not from Bitewing Games or Allplay, and really highlight some of the great work that some of these other publishers, but also their artists are doing, and graphic designers, to help bring these games to life.
Yeah, and very specifically, we decided that no, we cannot include. I can't include Bitewing. Nick can't include Allplay. That was one of the rules that we established very early. One of the things I will also say about my list is we're doing a top 5. My games are not in any order. My number 1 is not better than my number 5. These are just the top 5. So I don't have a ranking of these. I think they're all phenomenal, top of their class when it comes to art.
Excellent. Well, do you want to start by sharing your first one?
Yeah, I will share my first one, which is going to be kind of one that maybe a lot of people have not seen. So I hope that you can pull it up. It's called Trick and Snipers, and there's an ampersand in there instead of an and. So there it is. Trick and Snipers. So this is, in my opinion, the best artwork Sai Beppu has ever done for a game. It came out from Mob Plus, who is the original designer of Nana, which became Trio, and Cat Poker, which became Panda Panda. But when I saw Trick and Snipers, and I wish I liked the game more, I think the game's okay, but the artwork is so charming, I will never get rid of this game. It basically features every different suit as like Star Wars intergalactic bounty hunters, right? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture the 7 in a trick. So that's kind of like this like idea of like snipers, right? So there's kind of this idea of like being able to like, got that, right? And that's how you score points in this trick taking game. But I love the illustrations in this game. I think they're so it is Sai Beppu at the best at what she does, which is like cute and a little weird. Right. And so this really highlights how good she is at doing that type of thing. So Trick and Snipers is one of my favorite art board game projects that I've ever seen. Really love it. Think it's phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard of or seen this. And I agree. This is super interesting. I love the illustrations and just the creativity of these characters. So very cool production. Yeah, thanks for putting that on my radar. All right, mine. I'm probably going to be way more mainstream than you are, which I guess maybe is a decent balance. But my first one is Whale Riders. Okay, Vincent Dutrait. He's done a lot of phenomenal. We were just looking at Vegas Strip, which also looks amazing. But something about Whale Riders, when I see this game, it just evokes this sense of wonder and joy in me. You know, you look at the cover and there's just these folks hanging out with their very cheerful whales, and everybody's having a good time. And they've got these delicious looking goods on their whale. And this is just an interesting world to me. It's like a world, I don't know, it almost feels Avatar: The Last Airbender adjacent, where it feels like its own little universe, and a fantastical universe of people riding whales and delivering and trading goods along the coast. And then there's the storm coming, but they're not bothered by it. They're having a good time. So, and Vincent does a lot of, I feel like reds and yellows, but this one stands out to me for the vivid blues that he integrates with the ocean and stuff. And it's fun to like lay out the board and get out the components and just see the different illustrations that he did for it. So, and of course it's a Reiner Knizia game. But I feel like the artwork is really doing the heavy lifting for this game, which is rather like pretty standard. There's nothing like super remarkable about the game itself, but the artwork is just very charming in this one. So that's Whale Riders.
I also really adore the artwork in this game. I think it's some of Vincent Dutrait's best. All right. My next one is kind of a cheat because I don't know. I mean, it is definitely artwork, so I guess it's not really cheating, but it's not what some people I think would typically think of when they think of the best art in a board game. And this is a game by a French publisher, Bombix, and this is Sea Salt and Paper.
Oh yeah, good choice.
This game, from an art perspective, is one of the most interesting, unique, and special games that I've seen. And I am so jealous I did not come up with this idea to do origami like photographs for a game first, right?
Same.
I'm so mad.
Yeah.
I'm so angry. And honestly, I thought about doing a game recently with this style of artwork, and we're like, too soon. It's too close to Sea Salt and Paper. People are just going to go, like, we can't be the second people to do it. Like, once another game comes out with this artwork style, then we can be the third people to do it, because they're like, oh, there's 3 games out there with this art style. But if you're the second, you're like just copying, right? And oh man, it's so good. The origami is so good. It's so beautiful. Like, I find myself looking at the cards in this game as much as I do like making decisions about what cards I want in this game. And generally when I'm playing a game like this, I don't look at the illustrations at all. Like, I don't care. But this one, there's something about the illustrations that's so evocative, that's so special, that I can't help but just be entranced in the artwork of the game. And that is by Pierre Gallard. That is the artist.
Yeah, this is another game where there's not necessarily anything stand out or remarkable or like supremely innovative about the gameplay, right? But this game, I feel like, has really surfed its success upon the artwork and the presentation, and something that just it's hard to dislike, right? It's just something that draws you in and you want to see more. And it's cool that I also looked into who did the artwork for this game, and I think it's a pair of origami professionals, and one of them, or both of them maybe, is a photographer, and the other one does the origami or something like that. And this to me is very interesting, because we're used to in board games an artist, drawing on a tablet or on a piece of paper the artwork, and that's what you get. But in this case, there was way more involved. They had to physically make these components and then take photographs of them, and then that is what you get out of the artwork from the game. So very good choice. I can't believe this didn't come to mind for me. But I'm in agreement. This is an excellent looking game. My second one is one that I've already mentioned in this episode, and of course I couldn't leave it out. It's Root. This is one that I've owned for several years now, but I still remember when I didn't have far too many games to fit on my shelves, and I could actually turn some of them facing with the front facing outward. And I remember just having this sitting on our bookcase in our living room when I used to live in Ohio, and just being absolutely entranced by the box cover. There's something about it that just evokes this feeling of both whimsy and adventure, and kind of, again, a Redwall vibe to it, right? Of these creatures, these critters living in their own worlds and having their own politics. And the way the characters and their expressions and the colors and their environment all come together is just perfection, in my opinion. And Kyle Farron has done a lot of amazing looking games since Root, but I feel like this is still his best work, because for some reason it stands out and it sticks with me, and it's something that will never leave me, as far as what I feel when I see this game, and even the game boards and the way the world comes to life. This, and all the cards are worth mentioning as well, and just all the character that Kyle brings to this game is truly spectacular. I remember hearing Cole Worley, the designer of this game, talk about, when Root is a very mean game, but we wanted people to feel like it's okay to be mean. It's okay, if your woodland creatures just get curb stomped by another faction. And Root is kind of a way of disarming folks with the art style that they went with. So,
love Kyle, love Root, love Leader, love Cole, love everybody. But one thing that I will bring up about Root is my favorite part is something that Kyle Farron did that I think is really, really good. And I always try to at least achieve this when I'm doing something similar with the game, is his ability to minimalistically get the details of the full character distilled down to such a simple silkscreen design for the animal meeples.
Yeah.
The meeples honestly make root.
Yeah.
Like the art is great, the cards are great, the box is great, everything's great. But I feel like the way that they were able to so minimalistically get the meeples with the shape and the silkscreen to just really evoke the factions themselves, I think is really beautiful. I worked with an artist recently on a game that will be on Kickstarter called Oddland, and that game has meeples in it as well. And I really referenced Root a lot when I said I want a minimalistic design that just evokes the character of the animal. And I think the artist did a very, very good job, but I referenced Root a lot in the design of those meeples. But that's one of my favorite things about Root is the meeple design themselves.
It's so good. Yeah, and Root, like you, Root has been a source of inspiration for us in a lot of ways too. Not only for its success, but just how I'm just personally a huge fan of what they've been able to do with this world and the production and everything. So yeah, I had to mention Root as one of my top 5. What's your next one?
So my next one is one that me and you have discussed, and actually an artist that I convinced you to work with. And this is Veiled Fate. The artist is Harry Conway. I remember me and you had a conversation, and you were like, I'm doing this like mythology based games, and you had an artist, and the artist had to drop out, and you're like, who could I get? Who could I do this? And I said, you need to hire the artist from Veiled Fate, Harry Conway, because this game, my thing about this artist, right, is all of the art that I've ever seen them do is just very dark and very, like, it feels almost very sinister, right? Which is just not Allplay's vibe. But I am looking forward to the day that I find the right project at Allplay for Harry Conway to work on, because I am absolutely in love with the work that he does. I think the work that he did for you on Iliad?
Iliad, yep.
Yeah, Iliad, and just the way that Veiled Fate came together. I think it's some of the most interesting, unique, special art that I've seen in a board game. And I have been in love with I have referenced this game so many times when it comes to like board game art masterclass. And this one is one that I would put in that category of like, there are few games that have done it as good as this one.
Yeah, Harry has been fantastic for us to work with. I owe you one for putting him on my radar and making me, really look at what is he doing and how could he fit into our projects, because lucky for us, we have a line of mythology games. And so Iliad might not be the only project we do with Harry, because he was just really great to work with. And it seems like every time he shows us concept art, we're all like, yep, this is phenomenal. Like, and Kyle and I have both said, like, of our own projects, this is one of our favorite box covers that anyone's done. And as you can see, he has a very distinct style, and he's very good at it. So yeah, good choice, Veiled Fate. Really, thank goodness that game exists, because that helped us bring Iliad to life with his art style as well. Good pick. So my next one is another very mainstream and another Knizia. It's got to be Ra with Ian O'Toole. So Ra is one of my favorite games of all time, and I love what Ian O'Toole did with the illustration and presentation of this game. And I remember him tweeting about doing it early on, before the actual final box cover or anything was revealed, probably before he even had finished it. And I saw that he was researching Egyptian art, and reading these books about like what did Egyptian art look like in its time period. And from what I've heard, apparently it was a lot more colorful than what we see today, because it's faded. It's been so many years, and a lot of this artwork was done on stone, and so much of that color has faded. But he obviously leans into that original style with the look and the presentation of art. And this is just I just love the versatility of Ian. You're used to thinking of him doing Vital Lacerda, very complex, or even train games like the Iron Rail series. And just to see him lean into, not all these are from Ian, lean into the Egyptian art style and bring it to life again, just goes to show how talented of an artist he is. So yeah, that's my next pick, Raw by Ian O'Toole.
Love Raw. Absolutely love it. Love the new edition. Knocked it out of the park. I mean, honestly, bringing back Raw and putting Ian O'Toole on it, I mean, you're destined to make a lot of money, right? Like good, yeah. good on Chad from 25th Century, because that was smart. That was a smart move when you were able to get Raw and then do that. Really, 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 really good idea there. All right. The next one I have is also a Reiner Knizia game, and this might be the only one that we might have crossover on, but I doubt it. I doubt it. Okay. I'll give you one chance to see if you can guess which Reiner Knizia game I have as like best art.
Oh my gosh, 1 out of 800. I need a hint. You got any good hints for me?
An auction game.
Okay, yeah. So that narrows it down to like 100. An auction game.
And it's a very small auction game.
A small auction game. Oh boy. Is it High Society?
It is High Society by Osprey Games.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah. This was on my short list. This was one that came to mind, so that's probably why I was able to guess it. But yeah, good choice.
Yeah, so this is by an artist named Medusa Dollmaker. That is her art name. And when High Society came out, I think everybody spoke about it in terms of like how great the art is, like how wonderful the presentation that Osprey did for this game is. I really have fallen in love with this artist. In fact, I've reached out more than once to this artist to go, I'd really love for you. She was actually my front runner for the art for Big Top, but every time I've reached out, she's too busy. She has too many projects going on. I do still believe this is maybe one of the only board games that she's done. Because she does this like very, she calls it cameo style, where like everything is very framed and like everything is like set in frame, with her art style. But I absolutely have, she's done a few, just a few, but yeah, very few.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. But yeah, High Society by Osprey, I think she knocked it out of the park. One of the most interesting looking visualizations of a game. Again, we talked earlier how hard it is to do people. She did people so well. It feels like a French Nouveau novella. It feels very timely, very period. Like I just, everything about this game I love, from the art style to the presentation, everything. They did such a great job. So happy with High Society. I think it's one of my favorite art presentation games that I own.
Yeah, that's a really great pick. Very distinct art style that sticks with you, and I don't know if any artist out there could capture the vibe and the feeling of living in high society and flaunting your wealth and your luxuries, as well as Medusa Dollmaker did with this game. So very good choice. My next one, that's right, is Inish, which has actually had a couple different box. Divisive, yeah, I suppose it is.
Some people both love and hate this art. So yeah, this is a little bit of a divisive one.
I'll take it. I mean, yeah, you can see the original box cover here, which is by, I wrote down his name, Jim Fitzpatrick. And he had already, what's interesting is he already had illustrated much of the artwork that is in Inish before Inish ever existed. And I think I heard a story that an investor helped Matago to be able to afford Jim Fitzpatrick's artwork for Inish. And for some reason they changed, maybe because the initial box cover was divisive, but they changed the box illustration to this one. But I think both of them are quite phenomenal, and I love the art style that evokes that Celtic theme to it, with the like the spirals on this cloak here, and the very intricate line work done here in the background with the patterns and such. And you can see that throughout all of the cards and such. This to me, this has been one of my favorite games for a long time. It at one point it was my all-time favorite game, and it's still very highly ranked for me. But I'm trying to find some card art here. Another artist did the game boards here, which I think are also pretty great. But Jim Fitzpatrick also did the main cards that you were drafting and such. To me, I don't know. This game just it feels like it's in a league of its own. It's maybe that's why it's so polarizing as far as the art style and the art direction and stuff. And man, it's hard to find the card art here. But what are your thoughts on Inish and the artwork?
I love it. I love it. It's some people it's divisive, but I love it. I think Inish is one of the most. I think it's a beautiful game. I love the artwork style. I think it's great. Interesting to hear that like literally an investor needed to help pay for the art for a board game. I think in general, like art can be very expensive depending on who you work with. And especially if you go outside the board game industry and you're trying to work with like an artist. There's an artist that I wanted to hire to do a game for us. And I was like, I really want you to work on this game. And he's done a few other board games before, but recently he's been working with like the Star Wars license and the Marvel license. And so I was like, I want you to do this game. It's like 9 card illustrations and a box cover. And he quoted me like $30,000. And I was like, what? like, I'm so sorry, but like, that's like way more than I was thinking we would do. And he's like, oh, well, it's this, and this. And he's like, I'd be willing to come down to this. And I'm like, I'd be willing to do like 12 maybe maybe. And he's like, no, that's not going to do it. And I was like, yeah, I get it. So like some artists definitely have like ways that they can be very expensive, but it's good to know I won't reach out to the artist from Inish anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, as you can see, this card art is so cool to me. But yeah, I've had that same experience where I have a project in mind and I found this really cool artist who's never done anything in the board game industry, and you reach out and they're like, yeah, it'll probably be like 40K. And you're like, all right, never mind. Like your game has to sell gangbusters to be able to pay back that kind of art budget. So it's very risky to do something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on to our number ones, which for me, this is not my number one. This is no higher
same.
than anything else.
Right.
But I will say this is maybe one of the most, the most ambitious art project that is on my list. This is going to be Unconscious Mind by Fantasia Games. So this is my like if we're playing to like the big boys and everything like that. Now, to be fair, new release, but this game was on Kickstarter like 4 years ago. So like people have known about it for a long time.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I loved about this game from the very first time I heard about it is this concept of marrying two artists' styles together. And now when I said this is my heavy hitters, this is Vincent Dutrait and Andrew Bosley, arguably two of the biggest names in the industry. Like you'd probably throw Beth Sobel, Quan Chai, and Tool in there, but like two of the biggest, most prolific names in the industry. And what this company did, which I think is incredibly ambitious and such a wonderful idea, and I'm so glad I don't make projects to this scale to ever consider doing something like this, is they had Vincent Dutrait illustrate all of the real world things in the game. So they had him do the board and the character cards and like all of that. And Andrew Bosley illustrated all of the internal subconscious things, because the game has like an inside your mind and an outside your mind. So you're like taking actions on a board, but then you're like also like drafting these cards. I don't mean to speak too much about the mechanics because I have not played this yet, but like this is Vincent Dutrait drawing like that. But then you have these cards, which are like your subconscious, your dreams, your thoughts, your that. And they had Andrew Bosley illustrate all of that. So they had two very distinct styles of things set in the real world and things set in the subconscious, and used two artists to marry that together. And on the cover, they kind of have those two art styles merging. And I just thought, what a phenomenal like art project to take on. And no wonder this took so many years to come out, because I can only imagine how much work this went into just from an art perspective alone. But oh my goodness, what an ambitious project. Something that I just am blown over every time I look at this game and see just like how much tedious amounts of effort went into every aspect of the art from this game. So this is just something that I kind of feel like is just really special. And just an art, and I'm sure we might see more of this in the future, but I still think that this is something that in and of itself is extremely special, and no other board game has really pulled something like this off.
Yeah, this is a really good shout out. I agree. This game looks phenomenal, and the fact that they were successfully able to coordinate the efforts of these two artists, who live in very different. Andrew Bosley lives where I live here in kind of northern central Arizona, whereas Vincent Dutrait is South Korea, I think. So to be able to coordinate both of these artists and their projects together and weave it into a very stunning complementary production is fantastic. You know, I with us at Bitewing Games, we just launched our space trilogy of games where we recruited Quan Chai and Vincent Dutrait and Marie Bergeron to do 3 different games, and just you know, hoping and praying that they would finish their individual games in time for this huge project was stress enough for me. So I can't imagine how much effort went into bringing this one to life. So yeah, kudos to this publisher, Fantasia. All right, mine is much more small in scale and a little bit sad because I'm not quite sure who the artist is. It's very hard to figure out. I own a copy of this game and I still can't figure out who the artist is. And this is Botswana, but it's maybe not the Botswana or Wildlife Safari that you're thinking of. It's not this art version. It is this one. So this is the version published by the Japanese publisher New Games Order. And the reason I chose this game is because I used to own Wildlife Safari. Actually, I still do. I just gave it to my 3 and 5-year-old girls to play with now because they have little plastic animal figures in them and such. But this version of Botswana made me fall in love with this game. It's a very simple, elegant, another Knizia. Yes, that is 3 Knizias for those who are keeping tally on my list. But he has 800 published games, and he's had a lot of different artists work on his games, and that's the focus here. But this is what made me take a second look at this design to begin with and really appreciate the gameplay proportion of it. But the reason I love this artwork is just, you know, it's weird because both of them have like a childlike vibe to them. The Wildlife Safari, the old version, and this newer Japanese edition. But to me, this one is just way more playful and way more like subtly funny and interesting to look at, and just fun to break out of the box and play with. And what's interesting about the cards is they're numbered 0 through 5, and the higher the number gets, the closer the card art is to that animal. So like number 0, you see, or you can see number 1 here with the giraffes are way off in the distance, whereas number 5 is just right in this elephant's face, or with the number 5 lion, you're like inside its mouth. It's just mouth is wide open, and I don't know. To me, this is just a really fun, interesting art style that something that I really love about certain board games is they make me feel like they take me back to my childhood where I'm reading this really interesting illustrated book and evoke some of that feeling again while also still being a game that works great with adults and families and such. So I think the artist for this version, their name. So the hard thing is the different versions get mashed together, and so you have 3 different artists here who worked on different versions of the game. I think the one who did the version I'm referring to, their name is Goo. So I tried searching for like Goo online, Japanese artists and artists of Botswana and stuff, and I just can't find any information. I think if I were to figure out who the artist of this game is, I'd have to ask the publisher, New Games Order. But there's my final pick, Botswana.
Yeah, you see such interesting things coming out from different publishers. And sometimes you're just like the idea, like, and that's one of the things that I love about being a board game publisher and coming up with these ideas is like, oh, okay, the 5 card is going to be the animal really far away, but then it's going to get, this, and like coming up with those clever ideas on like how to represent the art in a game is just one of my favorite things about this. But man, yeah, what a cool game. I'm gonna have to track down a copy of this because you're right, it does look really, really fun to be able to have a copy of that amazing game with that just wonderful art style. One of the games I have in my collection that I'm most proud of is I have an original copy of Reef Encounter, which is by Richard Breeze, who's famously, his wife does most of the art for his games, but there were very few copies of the original Reef Encounter that were ever made. And so most of the copies of Reef Encounter that you find out in the wild have like this Z-Man art that was put on it, which is fine. It's fish, but like his wife's art for Reef Encounter was one of the most like interesting and unique looking box covers, and I will never get rid of that game because I think it's one of the just most insane looking box covers of any game that I've ever owned. So that's like one of the things in my collection where I'm like, nobody else has this copy of Reef Encounter, and that is one of the things that I like kind of love every now and then, is being like, check out these fish.
Is it this one here? With the big green fish?
That's it.
That's so cool. Man.
It's special. It's really special.
Rare edition. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I like that. No, that's a fun art style as well. So good shout out there too. Well, I think that wraps it up for us covering artwork and board games today. But before we close out, I feel like some folks are interested in the publishing aspect and what's going on. So I figured we could just chat real briefly about what's going on with Allplay and Bitewing Games. What events or projects or ongoings do you have right now?
Oh man. So we have a Kickstarter that I don't know when this will be out, but it might be launched by the time this comes out. It might not, but we have a Kickstarter launching on October 29th that is 4 small games from Allplay. 4 more of our small box, which include Vegas Strip, Money, Oddland, and Ruins, all which are from different artists. And I believe that with your 3 games on Kickstarter, we have one overlap, so that is 6 unique artists between our 2 Kickstarter projects.
Yeah.
Yep. So October 29th is our launch date, and we're pretty excited about this. All 4 of these games, I think, are some of the best small box games that Allplay has been able to offer yet. Really excited about it, and honestly, some art that I've been really happy to work on. So some really cool ones. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Yeah. Like you mentioned, we have our own ongoing project, which launched 2 weeks before yours is about to launch, Silos, Ego, and Orbit. And so it's going great so far. And this is our most, speaking of ambition, this is our most ambitious and kind of crazy project ever. We launched 3 large box Knizia games from Kwanchai Moria, Marie Bergeron, the illustrator of Thunder Road Vendetta, and Vincent Dutrait, at the same time, and revealed them the same time that we launched. So a lot of crazy things that we did just for fun with this particular campaign. We probably won't do anything this crazy ever again because it's just such high stakes, high risk. But this has been a really fun sci-fi project we've been working on, sitting on for a couple of years now. So it's fun to finally unleash it for people to check out and learn about. But we've got that going on. I know you and I are traveling to CMON Expo in Thailand next week. How you feeling about that?
Yep. I'm excited. I've never been to Thailand. Kind of excited to learn and get to know the Asian board game market a little bit more. Big Reiner Knizia fans over there, so I'm sure me and you will have a lot of interesting things to look at and do.
Absolutely. And we'll also both be at PAX Unplugged in December. I'm sure we'll mention that again as it gets closer. But there's some of the latest ongoings with Bitewing Games and Allplay. We'll probably link the both Kickstarter projects in this video if you want to check those out more. Again, shoot us any comments or questions if you have any feedback about how this episode went or what topics you'd like to see us cover. Again, what title you'd like us to have. Maybe the best title, if it comes from a commenter, they'll get a couple free games out of it. So a lot of reasons to interact with us, we'll be checking out the comments on the YouTube page. So, yeah, thanks, Joe, for spending the time with me here. It's been a lot of fun. Another great conversation, like we always have. So.
Yeah, no problem. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And yeah, just excited for just more information about the ins and outs of board game publishing to be out there at people's disposal so that people can, use that information to help guide their decision-making process as they, get into their own publishing.